The hall was alive with the hum of voices, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Hollow projectors flickered overhead, casting colorful, swirling images of distant battlefields and honored fallen comrades. Veterans from across the galaxy mingled. Tall, multi-limbed Xantari, lithe Velrus, armored Draktor, and the grizzled Vortari among them. This was Kethrin's Claw, a neutral moon known for hosting the Great Veterans Gathering, a biennial event where war heroes celebrated their victories and relived their glories. Commander Zelor stood near the edge of the crowd, his dark carapace, scarred and dulled by decades of service. His eyes, however, were sharp, gleaming with a haunted intensity. Most attendees gave him a respectful nod. He was a legend in the Fourth Galactic conflict, known for brutal campaigns and hard-won victories. But tonight, Zelor didn't feel like a hero. The auditorium's chatter softened as the Master of Ceremonies called the gathering to order. Holoscreens displayed the names and honors of the celebrated veterans. One by one, species representatives stepped up recounting tales of tactical brilliance, narrow escapes, and crushing triumphs. The crowd applauded, hooting and cheering. When the moment came for Zelor, the room expected a rousing battle story, full of strategy and valor. Instead, Zelor's voice was low and cold as he stepped onto the stage. "You want to hear about war?" He began, his accent thick with Vortari cadence. "I will tell you, but not the kind you expect." His eyes scanned the room, silencing the murmurs. "You have fought many foes. You have stories of glory. But you have never fought humans." A ripple of confusion passed through the audience. The humans? The upstart species from the Sol system? Many regarded them as primitive, even barbaric. "Why fear them?" whispered a Velrus veteran nearby. Zelor's gaze hardened. "Because they are terrifying." A hush fell over the crowd. The command hall, built to hold thousands, suddenly felt claustrophobic, heavy with tension. He gestured to the holoscreen, behind him, which flickered to life, showing a scarred blue-green planet. Earth. "I fought in the Fourth Galactic conflict. Many of you were there, but it was the humans who changed the war. And changed me." He took a slow breath, steadying himself as the weight of memories pressed down. "It began on Darax Prime," he said. "We believed it would be a quick campaign, a planet lightly defended by miners and engineers ripe for conquest. We sent 3 divisions to take the capital city, expecting little resistance." The hollow shifted to a sprawling urban landscape, skyscrapers clawing into a polluted sky. "But the humans did not fight like other species," Zelor continued. "They used the city itself, turning buildings into traps, turning streets into death zones. They fought dirty with a savage cunning that caught us unprepared." He paused, voice dropping to a near whisper. "We lost 1,000 soldiers. In the first day." A stunned murmur rose. "They set explosives in the sewer tunnels, waited for our patrols, then struck without mercy. Snipers hid in the wreckage of collapsed buildings. When we tried to advance, they flooded the streets with toxic gas, not enough to kill but enough to blind and choke." Zelor's claws clenched. "They didn't just defend, they hunted us." The audience sat on the edge of their seats. This wasn't the usual boastful recounting of victory. This was a confession, a warning. They fought with desperation. "Yes," he said, "but also with something else, a hatred born of survival, and a willingness to die. Their willingness to die for each other was terrifying." He looked out over the assembly. "We call it madness, but madness can be a weapon." A younger Draktor soldier leaned forward. "Surely you defeated them?" Zelor shook his head slowly. "No. We retreated, bloodied and broken. Those few humans we captured, they smiled when told to surrender. Smiled and spat in our faces." He let the words hang in the air, heavy and sharp as a blade. "For the first time I understood something. Humans do not fear death. They embrace it. They do not run from pain. They laugh through it." The room was silent. Zelor's gaze softened, touched by a mix of respect and sorrow. "You want stories of glory? You want heroes? I will give you that. But know this. Humanity's true power is not in their weapons or technology. It is in their spirit, their refusal to break. He stepped back from the hollow screen, letting the image of Earth fade. The murmurs began again, some skeptical, some awed. Galore took a slow breath, the old warrior's weight settling on his shoulders. This was only the beginning. The cold light of the twin suns beat down on Darax Prime's battered capital, casting long shadows over the shattered streets. Commander Zelor stood atop a ruined overpass, scanning the horizon through his visor's augmented reality feed. His mind was a battlefield of regrets. The Vortari Empire had expected an easy conquest, an industrial planet with limited military presence, mostly miners, engineers, and a handful of local militia. 3 divisions had been dispatched, confident in their superior training, numbers, and firepower. Yet, after only 2 weeks, those 3 divisions were decimated. Zeller's memories were sharp, as vivid as if it were yesterday. The first shock was the city itself. Humans had turned Darax Prime's skyline into a fortress. Skyscrapers were riddled with concealed weapon emplacements, entire floors rigged to collapse on unsuspecting invaders. Rooftops bristled with automated turrets and snipers. Every alleyway was a death trap. Geller's troops advanced cautiously through the streets, expecting scattered resistance, not the cold, calculated carnage they encountered. We lost the first squad in less than an hour, Zeller recalled, voice tight. They marched into a plaza that seemed empty, but when they reached the center, a volley of explosives detonated from hidden charges beneath the pavement. The blast took out 50 men instantly. He paused, swallowing the bitter taste of memory. The humans didn't just fight, they hunted, and the city was their weapon. Zelor's first tactical decision had been to bomb from orbit, hoping to flush the defenders out. Instead, the bombardment hardened the humans' resolve. They adapted quickly, Zelor said grimly. Their engineers rigged entire blocks with explosives, creating kill zones we couldn't approach. They turned the sewer system into a maze of traps and ambush points. Every shadow held a sniper, every corner a hidden blade. A hologram flickered beside him, projecting a grim reconstruction of the city, crumbling buildings, dotted with red markers indicating ambush points. They used guerrilla tactics unlike any we had seen, Zelor explained. Not just hit and run, but bait and kill. They sacrificed squads to lure us into traps, then encircled us. His jaw clenched. I lost a friend that day, Jarek, a brilliant tactician. He walked into a room to clear it, but the humans had rigged it with a thermite bomb. We found his body hours later, melted beyond recognition. That's when I knew we had underestimated them. The room at Catherine's Claw was silent, hanging on every word. Zelor shifted uncomfortably. But it wasn't just tactics, it was their mindset. He recalled a particular encounter that haunted him. We captured a human scout, young, barely out of adolescence. They brought him to our field camp, expecting interrogation. Instead, he smiled. Not a nervous smile. A smile that said, "I am not afraid of you." Zeller's claws tightened. He laughed while we questioned him. He refused to divulge any information. When we threatened pain, he welcomed it. The crowd shuddered. We tried to break him, Zeller said softly. But the more we hurt him, the more defiant he became. It was madness or something beyond our understanding. The veteran's voice dropped to a whisper. He said, "You think this war is about victory? It's about survival. We don't just fight to win. We fight to live, to protect what's ours. You'll never break us." Zelor looked out over the veterans' hall, eyes glinting. That scout died weeks later in a firefight, but his words stayed with me. He swallowed hard, swallowing the lump in his throat. They don't fear death. They embrace it. They fight because they must, not because it's glorious, but because there's no other choice. Suddenly, the hollow projection shifted to show a crumbling bridge. the site of the fiercest battle. Jellor's voice grew urgent. During the Battle of the Eastern Divide, a squad of 50 humans held a ruined bridge against an entire Vortari regiment. No reinforcements, no air support, just 50 ragged survivors, many wounded, many starving. He swallowed. They refused to retreat. They knew they were doomed, but they fought anyway. The crowd gasped as Zeller described the desperate struggle. Each human fought until they collapsed, firing plasma rifles until the last breath. They used flamethrowers to scorch the enemy, used grenades to cover retreats, even threw themselves onto explosives to save their comrades. His eyes glistened with restrained emotion. We lost hundreds trying to take that bridge. They lost every one of their fighters. The room was silent. Zeller's voice dropped to a growl. They don't just fight smart or hard. They fight with heart. A madness born of something primal. When humans rage, they become unstoppable. He turned away from the hologram, rubbing a claw over his scarred face. We retreated from Darax Prime, bloodied, broken, and haunted. The Veterans Hall remained silent. The image of human defiance burned into every mind. Zeller's voice softened, but the warning remained, sharp. If you think you've seen war, you haven't fought the humans. The bitter cold of Myra 7 was unlike anything Zeller had experienced. The ice moon orbited a gas giant in the outer systems, a frozen wasteland, devoid of warmth or light for most of the year. It was supposed to be an easy target, a small, human outpost tucked away beneath the ice, a minor thorn in the Vortari's campaign to starve Earth's allies of resources. But Zellor's forces soon learned that Myra 7 was anything but easy. The first sign that something was wrong came when Zellor's reconnaissance patrol vanished without a trace. We sent a scout team of 20, Zellor recalled, his voice low and tense. They reported the outpost abandoned, no human activity. Yet none of them returned, no distress signals, nothing. His eyes darkened as the room fell silent, the weight of uncertainty pressing down like the icy wind outside. We searched for days. No tracks, no signs of struggle, just nothing. The holographic display behind him flickered to life, showing the desolate landscape of Myris 7, snow-covered plains, jagged ice cliffs, and the skeletal remains of a few rusted structures. But then, Zeller continued, we found the symbols. The crowd leaned in, strange markings carved deep into the ice, cryptic glyphs etched with unnatural precision. They didn't resemble any known language, but their meaning was unmistakable. Warning. We dismissed it at first. Probably local wildlife or the humans, trying to intimidate us. He shook his head. We were wrong. That night, Zeller's camp was shattered by an unseen enemy. Soldiers vanished without a sound. Weapons left scattered. No signs of battle, no footprints in the snow. Whispers in the darkness, Zeller said, voice dropping to a whisper. We heard them, soft, haunting, voices speaking in a language we didn't understand. The Vortari troops, trained for brutal combat, were unnerved. The unknown prey hunting in silence was a terror none had faced before. We called it white silence. The humans were ghosts, silent, invisible, relentless. He recalled the horror of one patrol caught in a narrow ice canyon. They were surrounded before they realized it. No shots fired, no alarms raised. Then suddenly the humans attacked, cold, efficient, like predators striking from the shadows. Zellor's gaze hardened. Their weapons were suppressed, their movements precise. They took down my soldiers one by one. No mercy, no warning. The assembly was silent, the tale sinking in like ice water. We lost 50 men that night. 50 trained soldiers, vanished as if the ice itself had swallowed them. He paused, swallowing hard. But it wasn't just their stealth. It was the way they fought. Like the cold itself was a weapon. Zellor's claws clenched. They used the environment, blizzards, ice fissures, crevasses, to trap and confuse us. The holo switched to a close-up of a jagged ice field. One squad fell through a hidden crevasse, dragged down by the humans hiding above. Another was caught in a snowdrift rigged to collapse like a landslide. He shook his head in disbelief. It was as if they could disappear into the very storm. Young Velris soldier whispered, "How did you survive?" Zelor gave a bitter smile. "I was lucky, or maybe the humans spared me, for reasons I never understood." He leaned forward, voice dropping to a secretive tone. "They left messages carved into the ice. Cryptic warnings. I think they wanted us to know. We were being hunted." The room was quiet, absorbing the weight of the revelation. "Human warfare is not just about weapons or strength," Zelor said solemnly. "It's about mind games, fear, and patience. They can fight in the open or disappear into the void." He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every veteran present. "On Myra 7, the humans taught me a new kind of terror. To fear what you cannot see. To be hunted by shadows." A soft murmur spread through the crowd. Geller's voice softened, but the warning remained sharp. "If you think war is only about firepower, you haven't fought the humans." He stepped back from the hollow, letting the icy landscape fade. The veterans were left with the chilling image of ghosts in the frozen night, a reminder that human cunning and patience were as lethal as any weapon. The stars beyond the viewport were cold and indifferent, pinpricks of light scattered across an endless void. Commander Zelor's ship, the Iron Maw, drifted in the shadow of a shattered moon, its systems battered from the recent engagement. Around him, the war-weary Vortari crew moved silently, nursing wounds both physical and spiritual. The battle was far from over. Zelor's voice carried the weight of hard-earned knowledge as he addressed the veterans gathered on Kethron's claw. When you think of space combat, you imagine ships exchanging volleys of plasma and missiles, long-range, calculated strikes. That is how we fought for centuries. He paused, eyes darkening. But humans fight differently. The hollow behind him sparked to life, displaying a fierce orbital engagement around a dead planet. Our fleets clashed in orbit over the mining colony of Eridani 4, Zelor said, grimly. The humans were outgunned and outnumbered, but they refused to surrender their outpost. He recounted the turning point of the battle with a steady voice that barely concealed the horror he'd witnessed. When their ships were critically damaged instead of retreating, the humans launched boarding parties, clad in magnetically sealed suits designed for zero-G combat. Zelor's claws tapped a beat against the lectern as he spoke. They didn't just fight to hold their own ships, they invaded ours. The veterans leaned in, captivated. In the vacuum of space, the line between hunter and hunted vanished, Zelor said. These boarding parties ripped through our hulls, bypassed security systems, and detonated explosives inside our vessels. A projection showed the Iron Maw's sister ship, the Starbreaker, torn apart from within. Hull breaches glowing red, internal decks engulfed in flames. They turned our dreadnoughts into death traps, he continued. Our soldiers, trained for ground combat, were helpless against human fighters who seemed to thrive in the vacuum. Zelor's voice grew cold. I remember a skirmish where the humans took control of our command ship's bridge while it was still in battle formation. He closed his eyes briefly. They breached the airlock, cutting down the first wave of defenders with silent pistols. Then they hacked into our systems, shutting down life support in sections to flush us out. The room was silent, the weight of the tale settling like a heavy fog. They fought like wolves in the dark, Zelor said. Their suits were light, their movements quick and precise. Every step calculated. They were ghosts floating through our halls, killing, sabotaging, then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. A young Xantari soldier asked, voice barely, a whisper, "Why didn't you just eject the airlock?" Zelor's eyes flashed. Because sometimes they blocked it. Sometimes they used hostages, prisoners strapped to explosive charges. He shook his head. The humans fought without honor or mercy in space. They turned the vacuum into a battlefield, ignoring the dangers their own bodies faced. The veterans gasped. I once watched a human soldier throw himself onto a fuel conduit as it ruptured, causing an explosion that destroyed a critical weapons array on our ship. His voice cracked with emotion. He died in the blast, but not before taking out a dozen of my men. Zeller swallowed hard. That kind of sacrifice. We never expected. He stepped back as the holo shifted to a wide shot of the battlefield. Multiple ships ablaze, drifting like wounded beasts. This battle changed everything. We realized our greatest strength, the might of our ships, was also our greatest weakness, because the humans fought inside us. He looked around the hall, meeting eyes heavy with shared understanding. They had no fear of dying in the cold void. No hesitation. Only relentless fury. The veterans nodded solemnly. After Eridani 4, the Vortari High Command ordered a complete overhaul of boarding defenses. But it was too late. The humans had shown us that war was not only fought with weapons, but with willpower. Zellor's gaze softened with a trace of grudging respect. They made the vacuum their battlefield. A low murmur rose from the crowd. Cheller stepped down from the stage, the echoes of silent fighters still ringing in his ears. He glanced at the faces before him, alien warriors, seasoned and hardened, yet still shaken by the human stories. The tale of boarding actions in space was more than a story of tactics. It was a revelation. Humans did not just survive the vacuum, they conquered it, and no one, Zellor realized, could prepare for that. The sterile light of the human prison cell flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the cold metal walls. Commander Zellor sat chained, his armored frame cramped in the tight space. For a warrior used to commanding legions, this confinement was a new kind of battlefield, one without weapons, where survival depended on will alone. He had been captured during a fierce boarding action on a human warship. The battle had been brutal, chaotic, a violent dance of fire and steel in zero gravity. But what came next was far more harrowing. The humans did not treat prisoners as trophies or bargaining chips. Instead, they tested them. Zeller's first interrogator was a woman. Human, young, with eyes that seemed to pierce through his very essence. She did not shout or threaten. Instead, she stared calm and unyielding. "Why fight?" she asked quietly. Zellor scoffed. "Because we are Vortari, because we must." She nodded as if expecting the answer. "But why continue after defeat, after all you've lost?" He said nothing. Days passed in the dim cell. No food, no conversation, only silence, until the tests began. They stripped away his gear, examining, his scars probing his mind with devices he barely understood. The humans wanted to know what made a Vortari tick, how to break him. But Zellor discovered something unexpected. The humans didn't just seek to break prisoners. They sought understanding. One night, under the dull hum of the prison lights, the interrogator returned. "You are not like the others," she said softly. "You fight with honor, yes, but you also carry something else. Fear." Zellor bristled. "Fear is a weakness," she smiled faintly, "or a truth." For the first time, Zellor felt the weight of his own doubts. The nightmares, the faces of fallen comrades, the shadow of defeat. "Tell me," she said, "what do you fear most?" He looked away, the armor of his pride cracking. "Failure. Letting my people down." She reached out, a human gesture of comfort alien and foreign. "You are not alone." The days blurred. The humans alternated between brutal interrogations and strange kindnesses. They fed him real food, allowed moments of rest, even spoke of family and hope. Zellor realized that behind the fierce warriors were people who fought not for conquest, but for survival, for each other. In that cold cell, the boundaries of enemy and ally began to shift. One night, the interrogator brought him a small device, a holoprojector. "Watch," she said. The flickering image showed humans from Earth. Soldiers, engineers, children, living, laughing, struggling. "Why? Do you fight?" she asked again. Zellor saw something he hadn't before. A fierce love for home, an unyielding spirit. He nodded slowly. "I fight for my home too." The interrogator smiled. "Then perhaps we are not so different." But even as compassion grew, the war outside raged on. Zelor knew his capture was temporary, a pause in the endless conflict. When the prison was attacked by Vortari forces, the humans didn't try to flee. They stood their ground, fighting to protect their prisoners. Zelor fought alongside them, a reluctant ally in a battle that transcended species. After the dust settled as he was freed, the interrogator's final words echoed in his mind. "Remember this, Commander. War changes us, but it also reveals what we are willing to protect." Zelor left the cell not just a prisoner, but a witness to humanity's terrifying strength, their willingness to endure, to suffer, and to hope. Commander Zelor's return to the Vortari fleet was met with mixed reactions. Some greeted him with suspicion, others with relief, glad that one of their best had survived human captivity. But Zelor himself carried something heavier than any battle wound, a shifting perspective on the enemy they had long thought inferior. The Iron Maw approached the war-torn system of Talvaris. Zelor found his thoughts consumed not by tactics or strategy, but by the humans he'd met in that cold prison cell. The interrogator's words echoed relentlessly. War changes us, but it also reveals what we are willing to protect. The Talvaris campaign was critical. Human forces had entrenched themselves on the planet's surface, turning its dense jungles and sprawling ruins into a maze of ambushes and traps. The Vortari High Command demanded swift victory, but Zelor knew better. This battle would test everything they'd learned. On the bridge of the Iron Maw, Zelor reviewed reports and mission data with grim focus. The humans use the terrain to their advantage, he briefed the officers. They strike swiftly, then vanish into the canopy. We cannot fight them in open fields, we must adapt. His second-in-command, Captain Velrock, scoffed. Adapt? They're humans, fragile. They bleed like us. Zelor's gaze sharpened. Fragile? They endure more than we do. Their resilience is beyond anything we expected. The fleet prepared for planetary descent, deploying ground forces in drop pods. Zelor led the first wave, landing deep within the jungle's heart. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of alien flora. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a potential threat. His squad advanced cautiously, weapon systems ready. Suddenly, the forest erupted with gunfire, plasma bolts slicing through, foliage, grenades detonating with precision. Human guerrillas emerged from hidden bunkers and camouflaged pits, their movements fluid and coordinated. Zelor felt the sting of a near miss. They're here, and they're waiting. The firefight was brutal and chaotic. Humans fought not just to kill but to survive, and their desperation fueled a fierce tenacity. Zelor watched as a young human soldier dragged a wounded comrade through the undergrowth, refusing to leave him behind despite incoming fire. "It's madness," one of his officers muttered. Zelor shook his head. "It's more than that. It's loyalty, something we rarely see." As the battle raged, Zelor made a bold decision. Instead of ordering an all-out assault, he commanded a strategic retreat into the ruins, hoping to lure the humans into a more favorable battleground. Deep inside the crumbling city, the Vortari set up defensive positions. But the humans followed, relentlessly, using guerrilla tactics, setting traps and ambushes among the ruins. Zelor's forces were stretched thin. One night, under a moonless sky, Zelor found himself face-to-face with a human scout, a young woman with fierce eyes and a determined expression. They circled each other in the shadow of a collapsed archway. "Why do you fight?" she asked, voice steady despite the danger. Zelor hesitated, then replied, "Because I must, because my people depend on me." She nodded slowly. "We fight for the same reason, to protect what we love." Their brief standoff ended with a nod of mutual respect. Neither fired. That moment stayed with Zelor. Amid the horrors of war, he glimpsed the humanity in his enemy, their fears, hopes, and courage. The battle for Talvaris dragged on, but Zelor's leadership inspired his troops to fight smarter, to anticipate the humans' unpredictable moves. Despite heavy losses, the Vortari gained ground. But Zelor knew the cost would be high, and the war far from over. As he surveyed the battlefield from a ruined tower, he realized something profound. Humanity's terrifying strength was not just in their weapons or tactics, but in their unyielding spirit. And if the Vortari were to survive, they would need to respect that, or be destroyed. The storm rolled across the shattered plains of Talvaris, lightning tearing through the turbulent sky as if the heavens themselves were warring. Below, Commander Zelor stood amidst the rubble of a ruined command bunker, his armor scorched and battered, his mind a maelstrom of doubt and determination. The battle had reached its crescendo. The human resistance, though battered and outnumbered, had refused to break. They had rallied around a single desperate hope, a secret weapon hidden deep in the jungle, one that could turn the tide of the war. Intelligence reports spoke of a device unlike any Zelor had encountered, a biological weapon fused with human technology, capable of reshaping the battlefield in horrifying ways. Now, Zelor faced a choice: to seize the weapon at any cost, or risk losing everything. His squad moved cautiously through the dense foliage, senses alert for ambush. Every step felt like walking into a trap. Suddenly, the underbrush exploded with movement. Humans emerged, their faces grim but fierce, eyes blazing with defiance. Zelor raised his weapon, but hesitation gripped him. These were not faceless enemies. They were warriors, survivors, protectors. The firefight erupted, brutal and unforgiving. Plasma bolts ignited the night, explosions rocked the trees, and screams echoed across the battlefield. Zelor's squad fought valiantly, but the humans seemed to anticipate every move, their tactics eerily precise. Then came the horror. A monstrous creature burst from the shadows, part machine, part organic horror, its limbs thrashing and glowing with lethal energy. The weapon the humans had hidden was alive, a terror beyond imagination. Zelor's instincts screamed, retreat. But the creature advanced, crushing all in its path. He ordered his troops to hold the line, buying time as the humans launched a desperate assault against their own creation, fighting to control or destroy it before it consumed everything. Amid the chaos, Zelor found himself face to face with the human leader, a woman who had once questioned him in captivity. Her eyes held the same fierce resolve. "Stop this madness," she shouted over the din. "This weapon will kill us all." Zelor hesitated, the weight of her words cutting through the fog of war. In that moment, the creature surged forward, and Zelor made his choice. With a roar, he charged, driving his blade into the beast's core, feeling the searing heat of its energy wash over him. The creature howled and collapsed, the battlefield falling into an eerie silence. Zelor fell to his knees, wounded but alive, the cost of victory heavy in his heart. The human leader approached, offering a hand. "We fight for survival," she said quietly, "but sometimes survival means knowing when to stop." Zelor grasped her hand, understanding dawning. The war was not just about conquest or victory. It was about recognizing the humanity in each other, even amid terror and bloodshed. As dawn broke over Talvaris, the shattered survivors on both sides faced an uncertain future, bound by a fragile hope that perhaps one day war could end. The crowd was silent as Commander Zelor finished his story. His eyes, though weary, still held the fire of a warrior who had seen too much and learned even more. In the dim light of the Veterans Hall, his final words hung heavy in the air. "I once believed victory was only measured by the number of enemies fallen, the territory taken, the strength displayed in battle. But my time with humans taught me something deeper." He looked across the assembly, his gaze steady and clear. War is not just about strength. It's about what you protect, what you're willing to endure, and what you refuse to lose. The veterans exchanged solemn nods. Some clutched their weapons tighter, others wiped away silent tears. Every tale Zelor had shared had peeled back layers of myth and fear, revealing the humanity behind the enemy. For every battle on frozen moons, every silent kill in the void, every desperate fight beneath alien skies, I saw the same thing in the humans. Zelor's voice softened. "They fight for home, for family, for hope. He paused, memories flickering behind his eyes. Faces of fallen comrades, friends lost to war, and enemies who had become something more. When I returned from captivity, I was different. I carried their stories within me. I fought harder not because I hated humans, but because I understood them. A young soldier stepped forward, voice uncertain. "Commander, what happens now? After all this?" Zelor smiled faintly. "Now, we decide what kind of future we want." He raised his clawed hand, steady and commanding. "Let us remember this truth. The fiercest enemy can also become the greatest teacher, and in that lesson, there is hope." The veterans stood, a quiet murmur of agreement rising like a tide. They had heard the terrifying tales, felt the sting of loss, but also glimpsed a path beyond endless conflict. As the hall emptied, Zelor lingered by the window, gazing at the stars that had once been battlefields. The galaxy was vast, and war was far from over, but so was understanding. He thought of the humans, their courage, their resilience, their unbreakable spirit. And he knew that somewhere in the cold depths of space, beneath frozen moons and amidst shattered worlds, new stories were waiting to be told. Stories not just of war, but of peace, of unity, and of a future shaped by those brave enough to hope. Commander Zelor's journey had come full circle, from enemy to witness, from warrior to storyteller, and in his heart burned a new mission: to carry those stories forward so the galaxy might one day know that even in the darkest wars, humanity, and all who fight for more than conquest, can shine as a beacon of hope.